You can turn off your video. Welcome to the Curator's Critique with David Estey. This is the Midcoast UMVA Juried Winter Exhibition. Unfortunately, I would love to be in the Clifford Gallery with all of the work surrounding us, but the weather didn't cooperate. So here we are on Zoom, and I think it's going to work just as well. David's here, and I said before everybody was in, or everybody had come in from the waiting room, that David is happy to answer questions. He's happy to have comments from the artists. If you want to unmute yourself when he's talking about your piece of work, you can go ahead and do that. Unmute yourself while he's talking about your work and make a comment or ask a question. And we'll also do a Q&A at the end. So don't worry if you don't get a chance while he's talking about your piece, we can do a Q&A at the end. And David may direct some commentary specifically to anybody who's here. All right, David, take it away.
All right, thank you, Amy. I want to thank you for all your help, and also Waterfall Arts staff, Kate Bradbury, and also Tim Conte and his sidekick, the intern, Donald Patton, for the great hanging of the show. And also, of course, Leave Kristen and Robinson, who invited me to be the curator, and she also was there to help me place the work, which then Tim did a great job in hanging. So that all worked out great. I thought I'd try to set a context for what we're doing tonight and what I was doing in curating this show. I'd like to say a few words about curating. I can't tell all of whom might be in the audience, but I know many of you know these things, but some of you may not. But curating involves a lot of different things. It depends on whether or not you have a theme. It depends on the juror's education, experience, preferences. A lot of curating depends on a kind of objectivity, supposed objectivity, which might include the design elements and principles like color, lines, shapes, focus, unity, mood, criteria like that to judge the work on. Also the technical skills that you see, and maybe the professionalism that's shown in the work. And the credibility, perhaps, if there are likenesses. But these days, it seems like anything goes, just like everything else. These rules may or may not apply. People are pushing the envelope. And then there's the question of subjectivity. So even though we might say we would like curating to be objective, it's always subjective, of course. Again, depending on the curator's credentials, personality, natural preferences, maybe the desire for a theme in the overall exhibit, the overall quality and look of the exhibit might be important to the curator. And also maybe there's a natural feeling about abstract versus.
Okay, I've got it. Thank you. Thank you for picking.
Are you okay? Are they all right? Okay. So the person might have a propensity to like abstraction, or maybe realism better, or maybe looking for a narrative. And then finally, I guess in all cases, sometimes one of the most important things is the wow factor. Maybe all these things get tossed out the window if there's a piece of justice extraordinary for one reason or another, something we just never seen before, never thought we would see. But I guess all of this serves to suggest that when we as artists are accepted into a show, we should be happy about that, but we should not despair about the meaning of not being accepted in a show, because there are just too many factors, and we cannot know them all. So I'd say to my fellow artists, compete with yourself, not with others. So on this particular show, curating this one, I'd like to say a little bit about what I did, because I think it's a little unusual. We decided at the outset to be inclusive in support of the local artists and the growing UMVA chapter. And also, it turns out that the entries varied in many aspects, but they all had something to teach us, I thought. And then sometimes the two entries that were allowed were, in my mind, pretty much equal. And there was no real reason to choose one over the other. And also, since there was no prize and no real competition here, I made the unusual decision as a curator to include all the entries. So you might think, well, you weren't curating at all then. I think that may be valid, but I thought my decision, I guess, was to be inclusive. And it was interesting to me and very surprising that the results of that at the opening were a tremendous amount of interest and a huge volume of viewers. I had never seen anything like that, so I was quite pleased. I do have my own preferences, of course, and some of those might become clear tonight. So as Amy said, if you'd like to comment on your work, I'll invite a few people to comment, because I thought, you know, maybe they could explain some things that I don't understand. But otherwise, let's take a look at the work. I guess first of all, I should have put up my next slide here, because I wanted to give credit to the Union of Maine Visual Artists, and hope that some of you will consider joining this new chapter here in the Midcoast area. The whole purpose of UMVA is to do this kind of thing, to connect artists, to promote artists and art in the state of Maine. So I hope you'll consider maybe joining if you're not already a member. And you don't have to be an artist to be a member. So let's
David, I'm sorry to interrupt for 1 second, just to make it clear. In order to be part of this exhibition, or even to submit an entry for the this juried show, they had to become members of UMVA. So there's nobody in the show who is not a current member, just to clarify.
That's great. That's great, but there may be people watching who are
Oh,
not.
right, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so let's take a look at the show then. Lesha Soker's Freedom, that was given a very prominent place for a good reason, because it meets almost any criteria and then has a powerful, timely message in tribute to her Ukrainian mother and the struggle going on there right now. So it's very, very timely. She had a Waterfall put up a label where she explained the work. If you get a chance to see that, tomorrow, I guess, is the last day of the exhibit. But she had a very nice explanation of what she was doing here. But obviously, she's using the Ukrainian colors of the flag. And this babushka without a face, I think, is very significant in maybe suggesting the loss or the losses of the people in Ukraine. All the mothers and sisters and wives, children, and a tribute to her own mother. So it's a very powerful piece and a good, a nice piece of painting. I don't know if I don't think Lesha is tuned in tonight, but she could comment if so. Otherwise, let's move on. Marjorie Arnett's Blooms and Bang, two paintings. I put them together so you can compare them, because they're very different pieces coming from one artist, but not totally different. I thought that in filling the square with the blossoms, this was very unlike your usual still life. And in doing that, she's emphasizing the abstract quality of the piece. So it's both very abstract and very realistic at the same time. A wonderful flower painting, but also a beautiful abstract painting. And then, of course, the one on the right bang is really abstract, and it's very much about the violence in our society. And she incorporated a nice little label also explaining what her motivation was. But at first glance, you might see it as, being totally different from the flower painting, but actually it isn't. It's more abstract, of course, and the narrative is more about violence, but when you can see the actual painting and appreciate the texture of the paint, and it's very painterly, and you really appreciate the brush strokes, and it's really handsome, rugged, abstract painting. And the next one, Joanne Tarlins. This is one of her two paintings. This one called Regeneration. The other one is Self-Preservation, and they're both about the chaos and disruption that COVID brought into our lives. When we saw these two, Kristen and I, and trying to place them, put them in either side of Alessia's piece, because we thought they were sort of explosive and explosive in a soft way. And from talking to Joanne since, I've learned that yes, they're very much about that kind of thing. Only it was her reaction to all the chaos during COVID, and maybe it's more like an implosion than an explosion. But it was trying to react to all the things that she was feeling. And this one by Karen Jalenfis, she had two very large pieces in the hallway. And this one I liked a little better than the other, but they're both very strong abstracts. This one's called Early Spring, and it certainly feels like early spring, mud season. So it has a narrative that feels very much like our Maine weather, even right now, before the snow came. The other painting is also very impressive and a very nice abstract painting. More about, let's see, I forget what that, guess I jotted down the name of it, but I think it had to do with the summer season. But I had a slight preference for this one. Next one, Kenny Cole's piece, is also very rugged and very abstract when you think about it that way. And it's very small. It's only 5 by 5 inches, but it has the same strength as his more typical paintings that are 5 or 6 feet square. And there's nobody's works that's quite like Kenny's. And it's usually very political. He's making a very strong statement. In this case, kind of strange. Not sure I understand the whole thing, but it seems to be, when he says the battle for a green future, here you have the nature battling with Santa Claus, who often shows up in his pieces, and two men who sort of look like Amish men, but I don't know that they are. But the thing is that maybe is behind all of these battles is money. And so he's saying quite a bit in this piece, but the sheer power of the graphic imagery is very powerful in itself, even though the piece is really small. Sally Stanton's Soft Inside is one of two really remarkable pieces out in the hallway, which Waterfall's Bridget says is the best place for paintings to be, because that place gets the most traffic. So it's also a premier spot for this particular painting and its companion. I happen to like this one a little bit better. Both are great, and Sally's work is always phenomenal in my view. But I think the thing that I would point out in this piece, just looking at the abstract nature of it and the colorful busyness that's going on. But if you look at any one of these little characters, the faces, the bodies, and look at the painting up close, you'll find some wonderful texture. So every little area has a lot of attention paid to it, with scruffing and richness and lines and scraping and texture. It's remarkable. I don't know what the narrative is, to tell you the truth. In fact, if Sally is with us, maybe she wants to chime in and tell us, but I don't have a clue, and it doesn't matter. And Bernadette de Cesare is another one who, in my view, always produces fascinating work. But here again, I don't know what the reference to Lady Day is. I don't think it's the well-known jazz singer, but it might be. I don't know. But it is a beautiful painting, very whimsical, fun. And I think there's some imagery sort of like Sally's imagery, only much more, it seems like it's much more joyous or something. But it's a wild piece in any case. And next is Emily Sabino's Rain Prayer. The other one she had was a Underwater Hand, I think it was called. And I like this one a little better, but this is, to me, is a remarkable piece. It's strong. It has its own style. There is some of the same kind of style we saw in the other two pieces, but here I see almost even picking up some indigenous or aboriginal use of dot patterns and those little arrows, kind of little specks going in the figure, almost a primitive kind of imagery. And then the very decorative treatment of the plants and flowers is interesting. And this figure almost can be a shadow. Sometimes, you know, if you're taking a picture of something and your shadow is out ahead of you and kind of disappears in the perspective, it's almost that kind of a figure.
That's actually exactly what it was a shadow.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anything else?
The things you're calling arrows, those are raindrops.
Okay, it makes
or they
sense.
could be. To me, they
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
picturing it like a prayer for rain because sometimes I like to ask the sky for some rain. So
Yeah. Great. Well, it's a beautiful piece.
thank you.
And then this one is another example of what looks to be like totally different work by the same artist. Libby's Hush has a similar kind of colorful style and treatment of figures that we saw in some of the earlier pieces here. But it's very distinctive, and there's a similarity between the two in the kind of tactile 3D sense of, in Hush, she almost molds these little rose-like elements in the garments. Pink roses at the bottom and white roses in the other one. And each little piece is like a really beautiful little rosebud. And of course, the one on the right, Lavinia, is much gutsier, and it's hard to even understand how she did it or what materials. But it shows a wide range of exploration between
It's all paint.
Pardon?
It's all paint.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I
Except for the
wanted
sticks.
to ask you the narrative suggestion of Lavinia, because I didn't know if that was a reference to the mythological Roman gal who was so powerful, or is it a reference to a plant by that name?
It was a reference to the Shakespearean play King Lear, I think,
Okay.
or Titus Andronicus. And Lavinia was had her tongue cut out and her hands cut off, and
Yeah,
she was later killed by her father. But this piece in particular was me working through therapy with some stuff from my childhood, and it evolved into a tumor of anger, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it's a strong piece, and they're so different. You would think, well, this can't be the same artist, but it does show a terrific range of exploration. But there are some similarities I see.
Thank you.
But that would be hard for a juror to choose. You know, which one of these do I feel is the most powerful? If I feel like I can only choose one, you know, it would be difficult. Okay. Here's one I also don't particularly understand. These are powerful pieces that Cynthia did. This one called Seer, I preferred slightly over the other one, only because I thought there was a little more going on in it. But they're both strong by virtue of the size and the way she has depicted the female figures. If you're on, Cynthia, you might tell us what you had in mind when you were doing these.
Yes, I did a whole series of these. I call them Bone Women, and they started out with combining figure drawing and portraits of some of my Armenian ancestors who were very strong women. And then I started working with words. I also do book arts. And I realized that I write all my own original work, but when someone called me a writer, it made me nervous. So I was sort of thinking about, if it's nonsense writing, is it just decorative or does it have meaning? And so I just sort of work intuitively painting, and so I'm still not exactly sure what everything is about, but it's sort of combining stories and visual design elements. So,
Thank you.
and I feel like I sort of learn from them as I paint them, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel as an improvisational painter that I don't have to understand everything about the result.
Yeah, I feel that way too.
Good. Okay, now this one, Anne Tracy's painting, this has a lot in it. It's a mixture, it's a mixed media piece, the paint and collage, and the paint is so transparent in places that it brings about this wonderful sense of color and light. I mean, this one probably has more of a sense of light than most of the works in the show. But it's very appropriate for the apparitional imagery and title that she has. It's much different from the other piece that is a collage piece also, called The Reincarnation of Cardinal Mazarin. I know there's a history there, but I don't know quite what she's doing or why she did that one. And now, of course, I don't understand totally what this is about, but certainly is a very spiritual imagery. It almost looks like a Rorschach test, you know, but it's a powerful and colorful and a very nice abstract piece. But there are these little spiritual images in there when you look for them, and the light is incredible in it. Anne, are you there? Would you like to say anything? Okay. All right. And here's another one, very similar coloration to Anne, actually. But Mary Ellen's counter-transference, which is very similar to the other one called transference. But I just happen to like this a little better. It's a more warmer color. It's a warmer color scheme. The other one is a cooler color scheme, but they're very similar. I don't know what the narrative may be here, but I think that pieces are strong. They're good paintings. They're good compositions, and very strong imagery and the texture and the the playing with the paint is interesting in both of them. And they're almost a toss-up for me as a judge as to which one that I would want to put in a show if I were only going to keep one of them. It's Mary Ellen, are you with us or no? Okay. And this is one of the most fascinating pieces in the show. The Kristen Robinson. And Kristen's work is always fascinating to me. She has got terrific eye. She finds beautiful photos in places that look like ordinary scenes the rest of us pass by, don't notice. And when she comes up with something like this, we have to wonder at how this happened. I think if we stop and think about it and consider that she is often doing photos when she's passing through an area, either by train or bus, or here probably auto. But if you think about that, then of course, maybe you're going to get some reflections from the glass on the windows. But still, you kind of have to think, wow, this has a lot of serendipity in it, happenstance perhaps, but she has a sense of snapping these things and then picking the ones that really are powerful. And this one to me is really fascinating. And the other one, the companion piece, taken I think a little bit later at a different spot, maybe on Route 3, late in the afternoon, is also very powerful and intriguing. Kristen, maybe you'd like to say a little bit about what you do and what you're going for when you do these en route.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I feel like most of our lives are spent traveling from one place in transition, sort of en route. So this is a kind of an ongoing series that started probably about 20 years ago, as I was going back and forth to New York to care for aging, then sick, and then dying parents. And I just felt like, oh gosh, my life is, when is my life going to start and I can be creative again? Because I can't read on buses and trains, which is how I would go down to New York and back. And then I realized, no, this is my life. It's right here, right now. And I just started to be present with what was going on, and this other world became visible out the window. And it's usually when you're traveling, it becomes kind of a marginal or liminal place where you see things that aren't ordinary. They're just in a different realm. And that kind of intrigued me, and it forced me to be totally in the present. And then you have to snap at the right moment. And then I started out hand painting my work.
Yeah, my battery went out, so I'm up with it.
So this allows me, I'm now all digital, and I can go back into the scene and hand paint it sort of metaphoric or digitally through Photoshop. So I just can tweak the colors a little bit here and there to bring more of the emotional valence, shall we say, valence on these images that are reality, but just adjacent to our own reality. That's basically it. Thank you.
Thanks. That's good advice for any artist, I think, than what you're telling us there. But amazing stuff. And here's another one. Dory Klein's two pieces are also wonderful photographs. And you would almost think, how could you set this up? I don't know how she happened on this, or she tried to set it up in some way. I don't know. But first of all, doing something at night, it's great with these cameras they have these days. But this is an extraordinary piece in terms of composition, in the way that you have a kind of focal point in the middle with the two doors that give the title to the piece, surrounded by a halo of headlights, and then in front of the red taillights. that creates almost the center of the picture, but also certainly the focal point, and everything kind of is drawn to or comes from that. And if it were just nothing but an abstract painting, it would be quite extraordinary. But to think of the realism that's involved here and capturing that kind of light, that time of day or night, is amazing. And in the bottom part here, where you see the pavement, it almost looks very much like her second piece, which is, I think it was called a Dead End, where she's taking a piece of pavement, parking lot or something, and it kind of disappears into the darkness. But the front part of it is all very golden, with this kind of texture that you see in asphalt. It's also a wonderful piece. But both of them are just extraordinary photographs. And she also obviously has a great eye, like Kristen. And here's an interesting one from David Hurley, Halloween on the Rail Trail. And here he's got this figure jumping into the air and captured at that moment, mysteriously in the fog, and just a kind of a silhouette, really. So much so that we can't tell if the person is forward or backward. And, you know, we don't really know what the story is here, if there is one. But you can imagine, you can make up a story of your own. But it's a strong photograph, an unusual one, and maybe something to generate conversation. But it's interesting that this figure is just up off the ground a little bit, and you just, even in the fog, you see a hint of a shadow. And the light, of course, is down in the distance at the other end, coming through the fog, making the whole thing kind of ethereal. Very unusual piece. David, you're with us tonight. Did you want to say anything?
Hi, David.
Yeah. Try to go back.
No, it was just a quick moment. You know, I don't really consider myself a photographer, but like many people, I always have my iPhone with me. And it just happened to be one of those moments. She took my picture, and then she was wearing, it was Halloween, so she was dressed like she was a kid with pigtails. And I knew that if she jumped, the pigtails would be a little more prominent. So, but it just turned out to be a very mysterious, you know, image.
Yeah, it's a lucky shot, but you thought about it, kind of, you know, worked at it. Great, thanks. Okay, so we're into some black and white here. So this is a very beautiful drawing, one of two that Deb Vendetti has in the show. This one, if I have a title right, is Fog Bank, although it's not like any fog bank most of us have ever seen. It's layered. She's got like almost a picture in a picture, or a drawing on a drawing, and this strange cloud formation is coming in, very unique formation. But the thing that I really like so much about this piece, of course, the rendering with the graphite is very well done, but she has all these soft clouds, but then down on the lower left, when she gets to the land, she's got all this wonderful mark making. There's so much to look at in how she's depicted the shore here with her marks, because you can appreciate them as rocks and grass or whatever, but also as very particular marks with a personality, marks with the distinction, so that you can appreciate that as an aesthetic piece of drawing, regardless of the narrative. And this also quite different mark making, but very definitely mark making. And these marks obviously have a lot of character and personality, and they kind of suggest the subject, but it's very abstract. And this piece is very small too. She has two in the show, very similar. I think they're both 10 by 10 framed. So the pieces are maybe like 6 by 6 or something like that, the actual work. Very loose, very strong composition. I like this one a little better than the other just because there's a hint of color in it. Just a little hint of kind of a yellowish green and a little bit of orange here and there. But they're both strong. They're small, but they're strong. And this one, I've said before about this, I think in the statement in the exhibit, that this is remarkably simple. But it reminds me so much of capturing the essence of woman. Almost like, as I've said, the 25,000-year-old fertility icon known as the Venus of Willendorf. Let me just kind of cut to that for a minute. There it is. Look at the forms in this, which basically does, again, being they think a fertility icon or a statue, that it sort of has the essence of women as people saw her then. But I think Greg has captured that similar thing in this drawing in just a few strokes. When you're doing this, unless you're working and reworking and eliminating and all that, which often it becomes obvious, this thing looks like he just dashed it off. But I don't know if he did or he didn't. But in any case, it's making a decision about what to leave with very few lines to say a heck of a lot. So the marks are in your face on the paper, can't be denied, but they have a narrative that's so simple, but so iconic, really, and basic. Greg, did you want to say anything about what you were doing?
Yeah, these were taken from a drawing session that I attended, and actually all of the drawings in this series started out as more realistic, what you would consider to be traditional portrait drawings.
Mm-hmm.
As I got into all of those more realistic drawings, I started to see the lines of what I thought would make something more interesting. And so I would ditch the realistic one. And as you said, I would just draw 20, 30, 40, 50 times the same thing over and over again with different lines until I came to something that seemed to work. I don't know how many this one took. It might have only taken 3 or 4 tries, but it might have taken closer to 40 at the same time. Just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. No, thank you. Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you're drawing over and over and over. Once in a while, one of them really hits. And here's some more drawing, painting, photography, collage. Quite a mixture of layers of things that Deborah has done. And I imagine this is probably, this one and the companion piece that's called Newspaper Dress are probably quite personal to her. Probably these kids are friends or family. But in any case, there's a lot of attention paid to this and what she has chosen to use. I can't tell whether the newspaper, the actual prints of the newspaper mean anything to either one of the pictures, and it doesn't matter. I guess that would be ideal if they did, but it doesn't matter. But they're both very strong pieces, and they're pretty similar. I just happen to like this one better, but they're both very nice and strong. This next one, I think I've used the word exquisite in describing this one, and that's, I think, a good word for it because there's so much going on in it. Also, some layering or collage, or it's hard to tell what all is going on in there, but there's a lot of care taken with the imagery, and it's very decorative. It's I think some of the collaging is decorative. There's a texture to it, and this dotted snow is also kind of, to me, suggesting an indigenous mark making. And there's obviously a storyline going on here. But the abstract aesthetic quality of it is beautiful and very carefully done, technically very, very good. And the unity of the color also sets a mood that I think is very important. In the other piece that Kelly has called Sturgeon River Pink Sky, it's even more complex in some ways, and a lot more of the kind of indigenous dot making that I'm talking about, that I find that sort of pulled up from a primitive culture, but also very decorative and modern. So anyway, both of the pieces are beautiful, but I happen to pick this one to talk about. This is another interesting juxtaposition of two pieces that on the surface might look like they're done by two different artists. But for example, the one on the left, the Winter Light and Olson's Field, is a very academic classic way of painting, almost like people were painting back in the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century. But very, very beautifully done, beautifully painted and seen, very realistic, but also very painterly. The one on the right is also a skilled piece of realism, but to me, it's a much more modern update of that kind of painting. Yes, the ocean can look like this, and here's this blue again. That kind of blue was seen in some other pieces, but we don't usually see the ocean looking quite like that. It's very decorative here. It's very abstract in many ways, and we've got this peregrine falcon flying down in the lower right-hand corner. It's very beautifully painted, very realistic. So the piece is realistic and abstract at the same time. And in this one, it's not quite square, but almost square. And she has decided not to frame it, but to paint the edges, I think, or to just have it with the edges bare. I don't think they're bare, I think they're painted, but anyway, without a frame, which is a very modern way of displaying things. So they look very different, but they're actually good examples of the skills of this painter in both cases. They just look like two different, very different approaches. This is kind of symbolic of the whole exhibit. Two, some very different things going on. And here's maybe that same kind of blue again. And Gail's pieces are very much strong and in your face kind of paintings of the Maine coast, at least what she submitted for this show. The other one, Blue Hill Bay, is equally strong, but it is more iconic in terms of being a picture of a typical little Maine island with the spruce trees or the evergreens. Very nice piece. This one I'm more taken with only because the strength of this, especially that blue sky and those clouds and the dark evergreens, this is something we've seen in the early painters in Maine, 100 years ago. And the sky is moving, and you can almost feel it, and the water is moving. And this, to me, then feels more like Maine than the other iconic image of the Maine island. This just feels like Maine to me, rugged, in your face, strong. Both of them, nice, strong paintings. And next we have this nice little landscape painting, Yellow Fields in Belfast. The thing I like about this one is that Jane has seen in what is apparently a dirt road or driveway, a lot of color in dirt. It's not just brown. And that's what painters see. It is and then she's doing the same thing in the grass in the field here and in the trees and the distant hills. It's easier to see some of this stuff sometimes in grass as it changes and the wind blows it and there's different vegetation going on. But a lot of people don't see that in plain old dirt. But a painter who's looking carefully and is using colors to make up the picture and is a colorist is going to see those things. And I think this is what Jane has seen. And I seen it, I can see it in our other one too, which has rocks on a beach, I think, sand beach. And in those rocks and the sand, we can see that same coloration that she finds and picks up and puts down. So I would say that what we're seeing here is a real painter at work. And speaking of painting at work, this one, I don't know if I'm spelling or pronouncing Jack's name right, but I can only guess at it. Jack or Jake Keenan. This picture of morning lights, I talked to her a little bit about her paintings, and I guess she's in her travels will run across these Maine landscapes and have to stop and start painting them, or maybe just do a painting sketch and finish them later. But this thing is a really beautiful watercolor landscape. And she has the control of light here that we found in that other painting, Spirit Rising, that I said had so much light. And I think you can see that this has too. And of course, it has to be the thinness of the paint and the whiteness of the paper that's going to make this light. So she has to be paying attention to what she's doing and controlling this. And both of the paintings are very nicely done, nice, appear to be plein air paintings on location. But this one, because of the difficulty of capturing this light and have it kind of, be in all parts of the painting, makes for a really terrific unity, I think, that can't be denied. And the whole thing, more than anything else, it has a mood. It has a very consistent unity and mood to it. And it's extraordinary watercolor painting. And so is this. I'm not a big fan of flower paintings, I should say, but we've got some good flower paintings in this show. And this one is one. In fact, she's got another one of a waterfall. Both of them have a very Oriental, Japanese, Chinese kind of feeling to them with the thin paint. I suppose the other one, Waterfall in the Mist, I think it's called, or something. Oh, this is Peonies in the Mist. The other one is Emerald Falls. Very much like that one's very much like a lot of Oriental paintings. But this one also has that kind of feeling. The mark making is important. Beautiful rendering of the flowers, the peonies, and a really, really nice painting. So I guess this was probably my favorite between the two, but they're both very nicely done. And these two by Sue, this Feather and Yellow Craziness, are powerful little pieces and interesting experiments, I think. I see them as kind of experimenting with what you can do in manipulating poured paint. And they're the end result is very attractive and compelling. What I would say when I see this kind of thing is that, for example, the feather is not like any feather you'll ever see, probably because it's poured and manipulated or the paint has been moved around. But the thing is, it's a kind of a motif in the middle of the rectangle. It's one item, an island in the middle of a rectangle. And so when we see that, I think so often we'd like to see more going on. We'd like to see more than just that one thing. Because once you see that's what it is, then you can move on. You know, there's not anything else to look at or contemplate. In the other one, there's lots to look at and contemplate, but it's very much like its title, Yellow Craziness. It's like everything is important. Nothing is dominant. I can't quite find a focal point, although everything doesn't have to have a focal point, but if you do have one, and if you supplement various pieces of a painting to the more important pieces, then you can keep the eye engaged for a while. You might even have a narrative, or you might not have a narrative, but you can keep the eye moving around. So I'd say the thing that maybe Sue ought to be exploring next is, okay, now I found some really interesting stuff. Now, what can I do with them to make a more interesting composition that'll keep people engaged longer? And I guess the yellow craziness can keep you engaged quite a while. But the feather is, once you figure out what it is and you see it's a feather done in a different way, then there's nothing else to hold you. So those are the only suggestions I might have. But they're nice little pieces and they're interesting, and I congratulate the exploration there. And Christine's Smoke Rose, I'm sure there's a narrative I should find or understand, but I don't. I like the piece. I like it because of the abstract quality of it. I like it because of the consistent color palette. It reminds me very much of the work of Cézanne, who, of course, is supposedly the father of all painting, modern painting. But he had a palette something like that, with browns and oranges and earthy colors, and the things that were kind of overlapping and mixed up and hard to identify. Exploration back in the early part of the 20th century. So I find that kind of thing in Christine's piece here. And she had another piece that's a little more narrative. There seems to be a figure in there, as I recall. Fish or Famine is the name of the other one. It's more dramatic, and there's more of a shadowy kind of image going on in there. More dramatic and more clarification. But I guess I prefer this one because I see more going on that can engage me longer. And perhaps with more pieces and more colors, lines and tones and things, it kind of has a stronger unity, whereas the other one is more, dramatic pieces of stuff. Last but not least, the sculpture in the show from Heidi. These are really strong pieces of sculpture. Very impressive in a class by themselves. And I would say that the apparently pregnant torso here is also a very powerful statement about women and societal attitudes about women. And you can even say it may harken back to that icon, the Venus of Willendorf. It's not about that, but it's that kind of statement, I think. And then by contrast, these egg cups are perfectly delightful. They're funny. They're equally well done. Beautiful little pieces of sculpture. So both of these are remarkable. And I guess we thought it was a good way to display them just by sticking them together on this little stand, but they have nothing to do with one another, but they do show you the wide variety of interests and I guess the attitudes, the seriousness, and the humor of this artist. So it's nice to have those sculptures in the show. So with that, I guess I would just like to close by again congratulating all the artists in the show, and I hope they're pleased and proud to be in this exhibit and to put that in their resumes. I think they should be. I'm pleased and proud to be a part of it, and I want to wish them all good luck with their adventures. But let me say, whether you're an artist or an art lover, I hope you'll consider checking out UMVA on the web. It's theumva.org is the website where you can find out all kinds of information about it and the things we do. But also, I hope you'll check out the Midcoast chapter that started up at this site, and maybe you'll consider joining them. So with that, thank you very much for coming and participating tonight. And if anyone has any questions or wants to talk a little further, I guess we got the time to do that.
Well, I'd like to thank you, David, for agreeing to be the juror for this show. And once again, it's been so exciting to work with Waterfall Arts in developing an exciting, multi-dimensional exhibition. It's a great institution to work with, and I, can't speak highly enough for the kind of people that it attracts to work there, to come there, to teach there, the whole package. So I would say, get involved with the Midcoast chapter, but get involved with Waterfall Arts as well. And thank you so much, Amy, for, it was not easy, I know, dealing with all of us because we were feeling our way from the beginning. This is only the second exhibition that we've put together since, serendipitously starting the reconstituting the Midcoast chapter after 20 years of hibernation. So I'll turn it over to Amy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristen. I think the show is fantastic. And I mean, you're teasing. I know that being hard to work with, but it's just a lot of artists. That's it. It's not, nothing more difficult than that. So it was really fun to have this show at Waterfall. And I really appreciate David's commentary and taking the time to put that together, because there are a lot of artists in the show. So that was really fantastic to have your eye and to have your notes and for you to talk about it. And I do want to disagree with your last comment about Heidi's work. I think that the chicken, the egg cups, and the pregnant woman have a lot to do with each other. I didn't have anything to do with putting those two on the same pedestal, but I think they work really well together. So that's my 2 cents about that last piece. But if anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself if you have questions or comments, or you can just type in the chat if you have something that you want to say. But I really want to thank UMVA for approaching, and Kristen especially, for approaching Waterfall and asking us to host this show. We only had this 1 month available for 2023, so it was a perfect fit. And I'm so glad that we said yes and had a chance to show off the work of this chapter. And I look forward to seeing what you all do in the future. Marjorie,
Yes.
I see Marjorie down there.
Oh, I had to help a neighbor. Had fallen in the snow, so I couldn't come till the very end. So it was this tape. Did I miss the beginning and the talk and just about the whole thing, but
We recorded it.
Oh, good. Oh, great. And thank you, David, so much. So I'll look forward to that.
Good.
Anybody else have a question or a comment or?
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about how, David and I, when we got we had no idea what we were going to get, where we were going to get 10 people submitting work, where we're going to get, 400. We just didn't have any idea. But what came in, there was just like virtually nothing that wasn't of interest. It was just so exciting to see such good work out there, and it's just pretty exciting. What's that?
It's being garbled. I can't hear that.
No.
Yeah, I can't tell who that was.
This is helpful for me to hear about too, because I'm going to be organizing the next 2 UMVA shows. So it's helpful for me to hear that you guys didn't know. And that it was, and then stuff came in and it was exciting to see it all together because I'm about to go through that process too in a few months. So.
That's great, Emily. And I'm just saying, just ride the wave because, you know, it's not something you can predict, you know, definitely ahead of time, but there's just so much good work out there. And, you know, I think you'll just work with the vendor and, you know, I'd like to see more of these Midcoast members taking on like you are, you know, the next.
I would like to just say that I think what you heard earlier was my son on Xbox because I wasn't on mute. So I apologize. That was me. And he still is, but I've told him to be quiet for 1 second. I just would like to thank all the artists that were part of this incredible show. I have had the honor of working at Waterfall Arts for almost 4 years now, and this is one of the best shows that I have been a part of and been able to see exhibited at Waterfall Arts. So I just want to thank you, David and Kristen, and everybody that was a part of this. It really meant a lot, and it was really empowering, I thought, on so many different levels. So thank you. And I'll mute now because my son's about to go crazy again.
Thank you.
I can't thank Amy enough for basically learning how to put all this together in a few hours so that it ran, you know, effort. It looked like you're an old pro. So thank you and David so much for making this happen. And nobody had to go and risk a life and limb out in the snow tonight. So it's great.
No problem at all. It was fun to work with David on this. So it was great.
I want to add my little bit about Waterfall Arts, that we are so fortunate to have Waterfall Arts in our community. It's been that way all these many years, and I expect it to continue that way. So it's fantastic.
I just wanted to also say tomorrow, Kelly DeRosiers will be doing our second brown bag lunch. We're going to try to do a brown bag lunch every month. I admit I stole the idea from the Camden Library because they did it for the UMVA show earlier in the month. And I thought it was a great idea. And it's not new. I mean, I've seen brown bag lunches, but I thought, well, why isn't Waterfall doing brown bag lunches? So we'll try to do one a month. We decided to do 2 for this show because there were so many artists. So tomorrow at noon, if anybody's in Belfast, Kelly will be speaking about her work. And I'm going to actually try to record that as well. I'm going to practice my tech skills and see if I can record it. Can't promise, but I'm going to try. And other than that, tomorrow's the last day of the show. So if you get a chance and you haven't been to Waterfall yet, I know a lot of you were at the opening, but some of you might have missed it. So if you get a chance, come by tomorrow during our open hours and check out the show. And if you can come to Kelly's brown bag lunch, that would be
Amy,
awesome.
I was lucky enough to catch Kelly's presentation at Camden, the Camden Public Library in conjunction with that show. And if any of you can somehow make it to Belfast to be there in person, it's well worth it. Her process, her insights, her knowledge, her relationship to nature and the microscopic world is worth, and her just the way her mind works and her artistic bent is just bedazzling. So don't miss it. And if you can't don't see it online on the Waterfall Arts website. Thank you so much, Amy.
Yes, thank you.
And Amy, this is in person, right?
Yes, it'll be in person at in the Clifford Gallery.
All right. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question or a comment? If not, thank you all for being here. Thank you, David, so much for your time and your effort to put together the presentation and your energy. And thanks to UMVA for putting on a fabulous show.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a
Good night.
Thank you. It's been really helpful.
Hmm.